3 weeks ago, I walked into a courtroom and signed away my entire life. My 5-bedroom house, both luxury cars, and the real estate empire we built together. I gave it all to my husband Vincent without a single argument. My lawyer begged me to reconsider, while Vincent's 27-year-old mistress, Brittany, actually took a celebratory selfie right there in the gallery. Vincent was grinning like he just won the lottery, but that smile vanished exactly 47 seconds later. That was the moment his lawyer reached the final clause on page 47. Before I show you how I turned his greed into his own destruction, make sure to like and subscribe if you believe in playing the long game. For 8 years, I lived inside a life that looked perfect from the outside. People saw the house first. It was big, white, and always clean, with tall windows that let in soft sunlight every morning. The garden was always trimmed. The driveway always had a car that made people stop and look twice. Inside, everything had its place. Every cushion, every frame, every little decoration looked like it belonged in a magazine. And I played my role perfectly. At every dinner party, I smiled at the right time. I laughed when everyone else laughed. I wore dresses that made people say, "You look beautiful," even when I didn't feel anything inside. Vincent loved those nights. He would stand at the center of the room, holding a glass of expensive wine, talking about deals, investments, and big opportunities. People listened to him like he was a genius. I stayed quiet. He used to say, "You don't need to worry about all this. It's complicated. I'll handle everything." And I believed him. At least I thought I did. Our son Tyler was the only part of my life that felt real. Every morning I would wake him up, make his breakfast, and walk him to the door with a kiss on his forehead. When he laughed, it felt like something honest still existed in that house. Something that wasn't built on appearances. But even then, something always felt off. It wasn't one big moment. It was small things. Vincent coming home late and saying he had meetings but smelling like a different kind of perfume. Phone calls he would take in another room. Messages he would quickly hide when I walked in. Still I said nothing. Because I thought that was what a good wife did. Because I thought keeping the peace meant keeping the family together. Because I didn't yet understand that silence can either protect you or slowly erase you. Then came the day everything changed. It was a quiet afternoon. Tyler was at school. The house was silent in that heavy way it gets when no one is around. I went into Vincent's office to leave some documents he had asked for. His office was always off-limits in an unspoken way. He never said I couldn't go in, but I always felt like I shouldn't. That day I stepped inside anyway. At first, nothing looked unusual. The desk was clean. The shelves were full of files. Everything looked as controlled and perfect as the rest of our life. Until I saw the folder. It was slightly open, just enough for me to notice the red stamp on the top page. Final notice. I remember freezing. Something about those words didn't belong in our world. Not in the life Vincent had built. Not in the image he showed everyone. I told myself to close the folder and walk away. But I didn't. I opened it. Inside were more pages. Each one stamped in red. Each one louder than the last. Payment overdue. Legal warning. Immediate action required. My hands started to shake. I kept turning pages. Loan documents. Debt statements. Legal letters. Numbers I had never seen before. And then I saw it clearly. $4.7 million. Debt. Not profit. Not investment. Not growth. Debt. I sat down slowly like my body forgot how to stand. My mind tried to make sense of it. This had to be a mistake. Maybe these were old papers. Maybe it was something temporary. Maybe. But deep down I already knew the truth. The life I was living wasn't real. It was built on something fragile. Something hidden. Something dangerous. Then I saw something that made everything even worse. My name. Over and over again. On documents I had never signed. On agreements I had never seen. My signature copied. Forged. Used. I felt something break inside me in that moment. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet, deep crack. The kind that changes everything. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't run to confront him. Instead, I did something he would never expect. I picked up my phone, and I took pictures of every single page, one by one, carefully, slowly, making sure nothing was missed. Because in that moment I understood something very clearly. Vincent had built his life on lies. Then I needed to understand every single one of them. That day was the beginning of a different version of me. A version that didn't trust easily. A version that didn't speak too soon. A version that watched, learned, and waited. That night, Vincent came home like nothing had happened. He kissed Tyler on the head. He asked me what was for dinner. He checked his phone while eating. He talked about a big deal he was working on. I looked at him, and for the first time I didn't see my husband. I saw a stranger. A man who could risk everything, including me, just to keep his illusion alive. And still I said nothing, because now my silence had a purpose. Over the next few weeks I started noticing everything. The way he avoided certain questions. The way he became irritated when I mentioned money. The way new expensive things kept appearing, even though I now knew the truth. It didn't make sense on the surface, but it made perfect sense underneath. He wasn't living a rich life. He was performing one. And the cost of that performance was growing every single day. What shocked me the most wasn't just the debt. It was his confidence. His complete belief that he was untouchable. That no one would ever question him. That I would never question him. That belief became his biggest weakness. And I started to understand that. Slowly, quietly, I began learning things I had never paid attention to before. How debts work. How loans are structured. What happens when payments stop. What legal responsibility really means. I spent hours reading, researching, watching, understanding. Not as a wife, but as someone preparing for something bigger. Something final. At the same time, I became even more invisible in his eyes. I stopped asking questions. I stopped reacting. I became exactly what he believed I was. Quiet, simple, unaware. He relaxed even more. And that gave me space. Space to think. Space to plan. Space to build something he couldn't see. Because while he was busy maintaining his image, I was preparing for the truth. And the truth, when used correctly, can be more powerful than anything money can buy. I didn't know exactly how it would all end yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I would not go down with him. And I would not let him destroy my future the way he was destroying his own. So I kept watching. I kept learning. And most importantly, I kept quiet. Because sometimes the strongest move you can make is to let the other person believe they've already won. For the next few months, I lived two completely different lives under the same roof. The first was the one Vincent believed in. In that version, I was still the quiet wife who didn't understand money. I still asked simple questions, still smiled at the right moments, still played my role at dinner parties. I let him believe that nothing had changed. That I was still the same woman who trusted him completely. The second life was the real one. It began the moment I opened a small private bank account in my own name. I remember sitting in the bank, my hands calm but my heart racing. It felt like I was doing something wrong, even though deep down I knew I was finally doing something right. I deposited a small amount at first. Nothing noticeable. Nothing that would raise suspicion. Then I started building. Not fast. Not risky. Just steady. Every week I found small ways to move money aside. Grocery savings. Extra cash Vincent handed me without thinking. Refunds he never tracked. It wasn't about stealing. It was about survival. Because now I understood something clearly. When everything collapses, the person with control survives. And I had no control before. But I was changing that. At the same time, I continued studying Vincent's world. Late at night, when he was asleep or out working, I would sit with my laptop and go through everything I had photographed. I learned the names of lenders. I tracked due dates. I studied interest rates, penalties, legal risks. I didn't rush. I wanted to understand every piece of the puzzle. And slowly the picture became clear. Vincent wasn't just in debt. He was drowning. The loans weren't organized. They overlapped. Some were taken just to pay off others. Some were hidden behind fake documents. Some were tied directly to assets that looked valuable but were actually liabilities. It was like watching someone build a tower out of glass on top of sand. And still, every morning, he wore his expensive watch, put on his perfect suit, and walked out like a king. That's when I realized something important. Vincent didn't fear reality. He ignored it. And people like that don't stop until something forces them to. That's when I decided something else. I wouldn't confront him. I wouldn't expose him. I would let him walk straight into the consequences on his own. Around that time, Brittany became more visible. Before, she was just a suspicion, a feeling, a late-night message, a hidden call. Now she was real. I saw her name on his phone more often. I noticed how he smiled when texting, how he suddenly cared more about his appearance. New suits, new cologne, new energy. It would have hurt me before. But now I felt something different. Distance. Because I was no longer emotionally inside his world. I was observing it. One evening, everything became undeniable. Vincent didn't come home for dinner. That wasn't unusual anymore. But that night, Tyler had a school event. He was waiting at the door, excited, holding a small drawing he wanted to show his father. We waited and waited. Vincent never came. Later that night, I saw a photo online. Brittany had posted it. A rooftop restaurant. City lights in the background. Vincent sitting across from her, smiling, holding a glass like nothing else existed. That was the moment something inside me finally let go. Not in anger. Not in sadness. But in clarity. I understood that I was no longer part of his future. So I needed to fully protect mine. From that day on, my plan became sharper. More focused. I started documenting everything. Not just the financial documents, but his behavior too. Dates he was absent. Expenses that didn't match his claims. Transactions that showed patterns. I created a private record of his life. Because information is power. And I was collecting it piece by piece. Months passed. Vincent grew more careless. The more time he spent with Brittany, the less attention he gave to anything else. He assumed everything at home was stable. That I would continue handling Tyler, the house, the small details. And I did. Perfectly. Because the less he worried about me, the more dangerous I became. Then one day, something unexpected happened. Vincent came home early. He looked serious, focused, different. He sat across from me and said, "We need to talk." I already knew what was coming, but I kept my expression calm. He explained it like a business decision. Cold, direct. He said he wanted a divorce. No emotion, no hesitation, just like closing a deal. He didn't ask what I wanted. He told me what would happen. He said he would keep the house, the cars, the company, everything. Then he added something that almost made me smile. "You can keep Tyler," he said, like he was being generous. A child would slow me down anyway. For a moment there was silence. If this had been the old me, I would have cried. I would have begged. I would have argued. But that version of me was gone. So I looked him in the eyes, and I said one simple sentence. "All right." He looked surprised, confused. He wasn't expecting that. He thought there would be resistance, emotion, drama. But I gave him none of that. And in that moment he made his biggest mistake. He underestimated me completely. Again. The next step of my plan began the very next day. I contacted a lawyer. Her name was Margaret. She was calm, sharp, and experienced. When I showed her the documents, everything changed. At first, she thought I didn't understand what I was asking. But when I explained my plan, she leaned back in her chair and just looked at me. "You've been preparing for this," she said. I nodded. "For how long?" 3 years. She didn't smile. But I could see respect in her eyes. We started building the agreement. Page by page. Carefully. Every detail mattered. We didn't fight Vincent's demands. We accepted them. Every single one. He wanted the house? Fine. The cars? Fine. The company? Fine. We gave him everything he believed had value. But then we added something he would never notice. A clause. Hidden deep in the document. On page 47. It was written in clear legal language. Nothing tricky. Nothing illegal. Just precise. It stated that whoever takes ownership of the assets also accepts full responsibility for all debts, loans, liens, and financial obligations connected to them. Simple. Direct. Final. Margaret looked at me and asked, "Are you sure?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. Because by that point, I wasn't guessing anymore. I knew exactly what would happen next. And Vincent was about to sign his own ending. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not just in temperature but in feeling. Everything about it was controlled. Quiet. Serious. The kind of place where words carry weight, and one signature can change everything. I walked in slowly, holding my file close to my chest, my face calm, my step steady. Inside, Vincent was already there. He looked confident. Too confident. He was sitting with his lawyer, leaning back in his chair like he owned the room. When he saw me, he didn't look angry. He didn't look sad. He looked satisfied. Like this was the ending he had been waiting for. Brittany was there too. She was sitting a few rows behind, dressed like she was attending a celebration instead of a legal hearing. When our eyes met for a brief second, she smiled. Not kindly. Not politely. Proudly. Like she had already won something. I didn't react. I simply walked past them and took my seat beside Margaret. Margaret gave me a small nod. A silent reminder to stay focused. To stay patient. Because everything that mattered was about to happen. The hearing began. The judge entered and the entire room stood up. The air shifted immediately. This was no longer personal. This was official. Final. Vincent's lawyer started speaking first. He presented everything with confidence, repeating the same idea again and again, that the division of assets was fair, agreed upon, and simple. He emphasized how smoothly everything had been handled. Of course it was smooth, because Vincent believed he was winning. Margaret didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. She didn't challenge anything. She simply agreed. And that made Vincent even more relaxed. Then it was my turn. The judge looked at me and asked if I understood the agreement. Yes, I said calmly. Do you agree to the terms? Yes. No hesitation. No emotion. Nothing that would suggest there was anything unusual about what was happening. Vincent watched me closely for a moment. I could almost see the thought in his mind. He still didn't understand. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Then came the moment that mattered. The documents were placed in front of Vincent. All 52 pages. Carefully prepared. Perfectly structured. And somewhere inside page 47 waited quietly. Vincent didn't take his time. He didn't ask questions. He didn't flip through every page. He trusted what he wanted to believe. That everything in front of him was in his favor. His lawyer tried just a little. Maybe we should review this again, he said quietly. Vincent waved him off. I know what I'm signing, he said, almost laughing. That sentence was the moment everything was sealed. He picked up the pen, and he signed, page after page. Fast, confident, almost excited, like someone opening a gift. With each signature I felt something strange. Not joy, not revenge, just a quiet sense of completion, like watching a plan finally reach its end. Then it happened. The silence. After the last page was signed, everything became still for a moment. Papers were gathered. Files were closed. The judge began reviewing the final details. And then, Vincent's lawyer reached page 47. I saw it before anyone said a word. The slight pause. The shift in his expression. His eyes moving back across the line again, slower this time. Carefully. His face changed. Color drained. His hand froze on the paper. Wait, he said suddenly. The word cut through the silence. Vincent turned toward him, confused. What? His lawyer didn't answer immediately. He just looked at the page. Then back at Vincent. You need to read this, he said, his voice tight. Vincent frowned, irritated. What is it now? But he leaned over anyway. And he read. I watched his face. First nothing, then confusion, then disbelief, and finally, fear. Real fear. What is this? He said, his voice louder now. Margaret remained completely calm. It's clearly stated, she said. The liability assumption clause. Vincent stood up suddenly. This wasn't discussed. His voice echoed in the courtroom. The judge looked at him unimpressed. It is in the document you signed, she said firmly. I didn't agree to this, he shouted. Margaret spoke again, still calm. You agreed to every page, Mr. Vincent, including page 47. His lawyer tried to step in. You signed a waiver refusing independent financial review, he reminded him quietly. That was the moment everything collapsed, because Vincent realized something terrible. Not only had he signed the agreement, he had refused the one chance to protect himself. He had chosen speed over caution, ego over logic, assumption over truth. This is a trick, Vincent yelled, turning toward me. You planned this. For the first time I spoke directly to him. No, I said quietly. You just never paid attention. The room went silent again. The judge looked at Vincent one last time. The court cannot protect you from your own decisions, she said. The agreement stands. And just like that, it was over. In less than a minute, Vincent went from believing he had won everything to realizing he had taken on everything. The house, the cars, the company, and every single dollar of the debt tied to them. $4.7 million. No more hiding. No more shifting responsibility. No more illusions. It all belonged to him now. Completely. I didn't smile. I didn't react. I simply sat there breathing slowly, because the truth is, this wasn't about destroying him. He had already done that himself. I just made sure he couldn't escape it anymore. As we walked out of the courtroom, everything felt different. Lighter. Clearer. Final. Vincent stayed behind, arguing, shouting, trying to find a way out of something that had already closed around him. Brittany didn't look so confident anymore. Her smile was gone. Her phone was no longer raised for pictures. Reality had entered her world too. Margaret walked beside me quietly. You stayed very calm, she said. I had 3 years to prepare, I replied. She nodded. And then she said something I will never forget. Most people react, she said. Very few people plan. Outside, the air felt fresh, like I was breathing properly for the first time in years. But the story wasn't over yet. Because while the courtroom ended everything on paper, real life was just about to begin. And for Vincent, the consequences were only getting started. The first sign that everything was falling apart came faster than I expected. It started with silence. Not the calm, peaceful kind, but the heavy kind. The kind that fills a space when something is breaking behind the walls. The kind that makes even a large house feel small. Vincent didn't come home that night. Or the next. First, I didn't think much about it. After the courtroom, I knew he would try to fix things quickly. He was the kind of man who believed every problem had a solution, as long as he moved fast enough and spoke with enough confidence. But this time speed wouldn't save him, because this wasn't just a problem. It was the truth catching up. A week later, I returned to the house to collect the last of my belongings. Legally, it was no longer mine. Emotionally, it hadn't been mine for a long time. The front door was unlocked. That alone told me everything was no longer under control. I stepped inside slowly. The house felt different. Not broken, just empty. Like the energy that once filled it had quietly disappeared. Some lights were still on. A glass sat on the table half full. Papers were scattered across the kitchen counter. Vincent was there. Sitting alone. He looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. The confidence he used to carry so easily was gone. His posture had changed. His shoulders were tense. His eyes looked tired in a way I had never seen before. For a moment he didn't notice me. He was staring at a stack of documents, flipping through them again and again, like reading them one more time might somehow change what they said. "Vincent," I said softly. He looked up quickly, and for the first time, I saw panic. Not anger, not arrogance, just panic. "You knew," he said immediately. His voice wasn't loud this time. It was low, almost uncertain. I didn't answer. "You knew all of it," he continued, standing up now. "The debts, the loans, everything. You planned this." I looked at him calmly. "I learned the truth," I said. "What you did with it was your choice." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "You think this is over," he said. "I can fix this. I've handled worse." But even as he said it, his voice lacked strength, because deep down he knew this was different. "You can't fix numbers that don't exist," I said quietly. "You can't pay debt with image." He didn't respond, because there was nothing to say. That was the last real conversation we had. After that, everything happened quickly. The calls started first. Banks, lenders, agencies, at all hours. At first, Vincent answered them. Then he stopped. Then they started showing up. Official letters, legal notices, final warnings. The same red stamps I had seen years ago, now covering every surface of his life. Within a month, the house was in foreclosure. I wasn't there when it happened, but I heard about it. Neighbors talking, people watching as strangers came and placed notices on the door. The same house that once hosted perfect dinner parties, now standing as a symbol of something else entirely. Loss. Then came the car. The Porsche he loved so much. The one he used to park in front of restaurants so everyone could see it. It was taken at 3 a.m. No warning. No conversation. Just a tow truck in silence. I didn't see it happen, but I imagined it. The empty driveway. The space where something once stood proudly, now gone without a trace. And then, Brittany disappeared. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just quietly. The photos stopped. The posts stopped. The presence she once made so visible gone overnight. I later heard she had called her father, asking for help, looking for a way out. But there was no place for her in Vincent's world anymore. Because the illusion she believed in didn't exist. Vincent tried to hold on. For a while. He made calls. He scheduled meetings. He tried to negotiate, restructure, delay. But the problem with a life built on borrowed time is that eventually time runs out. The company collapsed next. Without money, without trust, without stability, it couldn't survive. Clients left. Partners stepped away. Employees found other jobs. One by one, everything he had built started to disappear. Not because someone took it from him, but because it was never stable to begin with. I didn't feel happy watching this. That might sound strange, but it's the truth. Because by that point, I was no longer connected to his world. I wasn't watching an enemy fall. I was watching a reality unfold. And there's a difference. Meanwhile, my life was changing too. Quietly. Slowly. But in a completely different direction. I moved into a small apartment. Nothing fancy. Nothing impressive. But it was mine. Every corner. Every decision. Every detail. Tyler adjusted faster than I expected. First he asked questions. "Where's Dad? Why did we move? Are we okay?" I answered him simply. "We're safe," I said. And that was enough. Because safety is something you don't truly value until you almost lose it. I started working again. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. For the first time in years, I was using everything I had learned. The same knowledge that helped me survive, now helping me build. Step by step. No shortcuts. No illusions. Just real progress. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit by the window and think about everything that had happened. Not with regret. Not with anger. But with understanding. Because the truth is, Vincent didn't lose everything in the courtroom. He lost it long before that. The moment he chose appearance over reality. The moment he believed he was too smart to fail. The moment he stopped paying attention. Page 47 didn't destroy him. It simply revealed what was already there. And me? I didn't win because I was stronger. I won because I was patient, because I was willing to see the truth, even when it was uncomfortable, because I chose to prepare instead of react. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. Life didn't change all at once after that. There was no big moment where everything suddenly felt perfect. No music. No dramatic ending. Just quiet progress. Day by day. Step by step. And honestly, that was better. Because for the first time in years, my life was real. Not designed to impress anyone. Not built to maintain an image. Just simple, honest, and mine. Mornings became my favorite part of the day. I would wake up early before Tyler and sit by the window with a cup of coffee. The apartment was small, but it felt peaceful. Sunlight came in softly, touching the walls, the table, the floor. There was no pressure to perform, no expectations to meet. Just silence, the good kind. Then Tyler would wake up. His footsteps were always a little messy, a little rushed, like he was always excited for the day. He would sit next to me, still half asleep, and ask simple questions about school, about breakfast, about anything that came to his mind. Those moments reminded me why I made every decision I did. Not for revenge, not to prove something, but to protect this, to protect him, and to protect myself. Work slowly became a strong part of my life. First, it was difficult. I had spent years being out of that world, even though I had been quietly studying it. But once I stepped in, I realized something important. I wasn't behind. I was prepared. Everything I had learned during those silent years finally had a place to grow. I started small, careful decisions, clear thinking, no risks I didn't understand, no shortcuts, and slowly things began to build. Not fast like Vincent's world once looked, but steady and real. People began to trust me, not because of what I showed, but because of how I worked. And that kind of trust lasts longer. Months passed, then a year, and one day, without even realizing it, I looked around and saw something new. Stability. Not the kind that depends on appearances, but the kind that stays even when no one is watching. I had my own space, my own income, my own control, and most importantly, my own peace. I didn't think about Vincent often, not because I was trying to forget him, but because he no longer had a place in my life. However, sometimes reality has a way of bringing the past back for a moment. I saw him again almost a year later. It was unexpected. I was leaving a small office building after a meeting. It was a normal day. Nothing special. I was focused on my next task, already planning what I needed to do next. And then I saw him, standing near the entrance. For a second, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked different, not just in clothes but in presence. The confidence that once filled the space around him was gone. His posture was quieter, his expression more careful. He looked like someone who had learned things the hard way. He saw me too. There was a pause, a moment where neither of us moved. Then he walked toward me, slowly, not with arrogance, not with anger, just carefully. "Hey," he said. His voice was softer than I remembered. "Hey," I replied. There was no tension, no emotion pulling in different directions. Just two people standing in a moment that had already passed. "I heard you're doing well," he said. I nodded. "I am." He looked down for a second, then back at me. "I didn't understand it before," he said quietly. "What you did." I didn't interrupt. "I thought I was in control," he continued. "I thought I could handle everything." There was no need to correct him. He already knew the truth. "I lost a lot," he said. I looked at him calmly. "You lost what wasn't stable," I replied. He gave a small, tired smile. "Yeah," he said. "I guess I did." For a moment, neither of us spoke. And then he said something I didn't expect. "You were always paying attention, weren't you?" I didn't answer directly. Instead, I said, "You were always too busy not to." He nodded slowly. And in that moment, there was no anger left between us. Just understanding. Not friendship, Not connection, just closure. I'm glad you're okay, he said. I am, I replied. And I meant it. He took a small step back. Then another. And just like that, he walked away. No drama. No final argument. No unfinished words. Just a quiet ending. I stood there for a few seconds, watching him disappear into the distance. And then I turned and walked in the opposite direction. Because that's the thing about the past. It only has power if you keep walking toward it. That night, I sat by the window again. The same place where I had once sat trying to understand everything. But this time there was nothing to figure out. Only something to appreciate. Peace. Real peace. And I realized something simple but powerful. Silence was never my weakness. It was my strategy. While others were speaking, showing, proving, I was learning. While others were rushing, reacting, assuming, I was preparing. And in the end, that made all the difference. So if you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever felt underestimated, if people have mistaken your silence for weakness, remember this. Not every quiet person is unaware. Some are just waiting, watching, building. And when the time comes, they don't need to fight, because the truth does the work for them. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.